Welcome, everybody, to today's session, Keys to Successful Planning, FCAs and Accurate Asset Data in partnership with Apple's Gold Business Partner member, ARC Facilities. Before we begin, allow me to share a few housekeeping items as we review the AIA guidelines on the screen. All participants will be able, and we encourage you, to enter your questions throughout the session in the chat or the Q&A area of the platform. By doing your questions throughout the program ensures that we can queue them for response. For those joining us today seeking AIA or educational credits, you can contact our team member, Billy Zidek, at Billy, B-I-L-L-I-E, at appa.org for delivery of this documentation post the event. Now, allow me to introduce our speaker for today, David Trask. David is the National Director at ARC Facilities and is the host of Facility Voices podcasts. He advocates for leveraging technology to enhance efficiency in organizations like K-12 schools, universities, hospitals, and more. A prominent speaker at major conferences and events, David is also involved in the IFMA World Workplace Education Programming Committee and serves on the advisory board for Facilithon. He highlights the importance of comprehensive succession planning to address the impact of facility team retirements, and we are happy to have David speaking with us here today. David, the stage is yours.
Hey, thank you so much, Suzanne. And thank you everyone for joining me today. And I really appreciate this because this is one that's near and dear to my heart. And we're really going to jump into the weeds and I'm going to share a lot of the best practices that I hear around the country. But let's kind of set the bar here with what we're going to talk about as far as with the current landscape that we often see out in the field. And let's start with FCAs and the impact on budgets and that long-term master planning at your facilities. Then we're going to talk about asset inventory and how it plays a role in making sure that that information is accurate. We're going to talk about old technologies versus new technologies, what some of the folks are doing out in the field today to move forward. Also, institutional knowledge. The challenge with retirements, the attrition, the losing people that are just the ones that know where everything is in your buildings and they've been there for a really long time. We're also going to talk about the labor shortages and the current conditions that we hear around the country with trying to find those skilled labor people to come in and backfill those people who are retiring. We're going to also talk about keeping up with building changes as you're building, as your sites change, keeping up with that and some methods that you can put into practice to really get your hands around that. And really the way forward, the way to take charge of your information, take charge of all your data that you use to make these big decisions at your site. So let's jump in and let's start with FCAs. Well, what is an FCA? Again, it's an FCA it evaluates the current condition of your facilities, identifies some of those deficiencies, also helps you guide those decisions that you're going to make at your sites. But how does that impact your master plan? Well, your master plan is that roadmap. Where are you going? What's that 10-year, 5-year, 10-year, 30-year master plan? And what's your long-term goals for your sites? Well, FCAs, where they come into play is part of that is your asset inventory, understanding what's really out there. Also your current structural and current conditions of your sites, your buildings, your stuff between the buildings. Also, utility mapping. What do you currently have out there? Also, it addresses your master plan and helps you make those big decisions when it comes to how you're going to decide what's going on with your sites. But also some of the frequency in which you do an FCA and how do you maintain that moving forward? How often are you doing those? And then how are you adjusting all along the way as your buildings change in between those FCAs? Well, FCAs include a lot of stuff, all right? It includes, again, your building systems, your structural components, building envelope, also the interior elements of your building, your site and grounds, accessibility, and a lot of these are the checklist things that are often included in FCAs. But they're really, I haven't heard a consistent standard in what the FCAs are delivering. Depends on your vendor. If you're using a third-party vendor, what do they deliver? What's the end result that they're going to give you? Do you know what to even ask for? Or you go out for a public bid and you get it's low bid. It really depends on what you're looking for. But at the end of the day, you need to look really hard at what's included in that FCA and make sure that it checks off all those boxes for you. The other challenge is the consequences of inaccurate FCAs. What happens if the information's wrong? Or if the information that you're really looking for isn't even in the scope of that FCA? Well, what that can cause is misallocation of resources. Also, unrealistic budgeting because you're missing different components that'll help you to understand what's also included in that replacement cost. And an example of that is oftentimes I hear that we did an FCA 3 years ago. Well, that was at 3 year ago pricing as well. But it also doesn't take into consideration some of the other aspects. It could be I've got to rent a crane or I've got to rip a hole in the side of the building to even get the unit out and to get the new one in. Timelines also. So again, make sure that when you're thinking about your FCA or you're going out for your FCA bidding, or to contract an FCA from a third party, make sure that it checks off all those boxes as well, and then you can adjust on the fly. Also, if sometimes they fail to address critical issues. Those can be faulty wiring or old wiring that needs to be updated, brought to current standards too, and a number of other things that I've heard, but also can have a significant negative impact on your long-term master planning. Inaccurate data. How are you supposed to make an accurate budget and long-term master plan when the information is wrong? All right. So ways that you could really take advantage of that is, again, with accurate information in your FCA, it helps you make those better data-driven decisions. So you have accurate information. Now you can see really a truer snapshot. Because again, remember, an FCA is a snapshot in time. It's the way it is today. Well, your team is constantly changing stuff. So again, that FCA, those FCA results need to be modified as you're also modifying your buildings and your sites. Also helps you identify accurate information, helps you identify real facility needs, short-term and long-term needs. Also helps you establish those priorities, helps you to really rank what you need to check off your list first, helps you with those financial planning implications and your long-term budgeting. But it's really that strategy and vision. It helps you to be able to adjust as your strategy and your vision for your organization changes. You have a truer picture of what that looks like today and moving forward to make those decisions. So it also starts with, and this is the second part here, is the asset database. So you've got assets all over the place. You've got information about those assets. Oftentimes it's stored in multiple places. But at the end of the day, how accurate is that? How often is your team updating that information as it changes? You're replacing units on a roof. You're replacing units in a mechanical room or exterior on your site. Is that information being updated as you go? And that's why I always ask is how complete is that and how accurate is that database? Because that also impacts your long-term decision making. But what we oftentimes find is in databases, 20 to 40% of the assets are wrong. And it's not intentional. This isn't a malicious thing. It's just people forget. They write it down on that little notepad or they write it on that piece of paper or they get called away. Your facilities team's running around all over the place. So did they remember to update that stuff or what's even that process? So when you update something in the field, what is that process to make sure that it's updated in all those different buckets that it needs to be updated so everybody's looking at the same stuff? And a lot of the times that means that equipment that's been replaced or it's been decommissioned or you've moved or even repurposed that information or repurposed that unit, or it's just a brand new unit, but it just hasn't been documented. It's missing stuff. Well, also I see this all the time. It's 80 to 90% of the information that's in that database is still missing something. It could be the location, the room number, model number, year it was installed. Again, it's just missing key things that'll help you to really be able to identify, listen, this unit's 15 years old. We need to really think about the end of life date on this thing and taking a look at what we're going to do when that unit is actually, it actually finally dies. The other challenge is oftentimes I hear, units they aren't breaking on our schedule. They don't break on a clock or a calendar. They break when they break. So you also have to look at the implications is if it breaks, how long is it going to take me to get a new unit? I'm hearing everything from 6 months to 18 months on some different kinds of devices. And again, what that also can come down to is rental. So I have to rent a unit to replace that one. And I talked to one guy, he rented a chiller, and he rented this chiller and it was on a trailer, and it was $10,000 a month. Well, that's not budgeted. And on top of it, it took him over a year to get the new ones. So again, remember what I said. It's just keep that stuff in mind, that any of this stuff can impact that long-term budget as well. But this is what I oftentimes see is just, again, it's missing holes. You're missing a description. You're missing a serial number. As your team's out in the field, ask yourself this: do they have a way to update that while they're standing in front of the unit? Or they open up the side door of the unit and there's the serial plate. Can they add that stuff? If they can't, why not? A lot of times it's in an Excel spreadsheet or it's on a work order system or something like that. But where are they, or what's the method in which they can update that stuff in the field? Can they pull their phone out of their pocket and update it, or do they have to write it on a piece of paper and get it back to an admin or somebody, or when I get to a desktop computer to be able to update that? Again, it's just a process thing. But this is what everybody wants. You want a complete list. This gives you a complete snapshot of what's really out in the field. Field verified, though. How often is your team out there field verifying what's really out there? What's changed? Do you do it annually? Do you do it quarterly? Or maybe you haven't ever done it. I don't know. It's going to be different for everybody. But again, you want it as complete a list as you can so that you and your team can make those informed decisions and also know where everything is out in the field. And we'll take a look at that here in just a second. But what it really comes down to is this, like I said, is knowing what's out in the field, that field verified, real data on what's out in the field today. And as you change something tomorrow, being able to update that in the field so that it's real time and everybody can see that. So again, it's not just going into a spreadsheet. Everybody can access that information wherever the heck they are. All right. But the other challenge is too, your team's going up and down, and this is just a day in the life. Your team goes up on a roof to swap out a belt on a unit, and they go up there because they can't remember what belt size they need, or they can't remember what the unit is. So they go up there, they pop the top off of that exhaust fan. They realize they need belt number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or they're popping the ceiling grid, getting up on a ladder, obviously going up the side of a building, but they're going back and forth. And then and a lot of that comes down to they just don't remember what they need to get up there. But being able to document that also in the records, like I showed before, will save a lot of that time, that ladder time, that back and forth, going back to the room to grab the parts. Again, it's all about time. And a lot of this is your team is running around on a skeleton crew sometimes anyway. You want to mitigate that time and keep that time that they're spending back and forth down to a minimum. And we'll look at that here in a second. But the other challenge is a lot of folks have a lot of this stuff, just older equipment, and they're running it to end of life, or running it. It's far beyond its useful life expectancy, but it's running. So you're running it, and that's these are some of the things that can be a challenge, because you don't know when its last day is going to be. But again, it's a lot of this stuff is still out in the field. We call these ghost assets or even zombie assets. They're still running. They're running okay, but are they also running efficiently? And a lot of the new units you're going to replace are for energy consumption, or that's going to really save you some money too. But these are not running efficiently in most cases. So again, being able to access where that stuff is and maintain that stuff is going to be beneficial to extend the life potentially of those units as well. The other thing is, your team's on the move. They're up on a ladder, they're on a lift, they're on a roof, they're wherever, and they're getting calls all the time. Hey, we have an emergency over here. We got to go over to this building over here. It's clear across campus. What do? I jump in my golf cart, run over there. I didn't finish the job I was on the roof working on, so I'm going back and forth, back and forth. But a lot of times where we find is the challenge is they're going back and forth between the different buildings, but then they're also going back to another area, whether it's back to their truck, whether it's back to the parts room, whether it's they're running up to a store to grab something, whatever the case may be. But a lot of the reason they're going back and forth is because they don't have a way to access the stuff that is for that unit. Okay, specifically that unit. I don't even know make, model, serial number, or what parts are associated with that. So I can't even look it up, even do on Google search on my phone, because I just don't know. Well, what we're talking about is time. Again, time of guys and gals on your team running around like crazy, and we want to try to mitigate that. But they're also doing it in all weather. You can see that picture in the middle there. There's snow on that roof. Does that unit breaks, they're still going up that ladder. So you want to mitigate from a safety standpoint too, minimize the number of times that they're going up and down that ladder as well. So what are some of the ways that you can really capture that information, keep that up to date and accessible by everybody? Well, it starts with really getting rid of some of the old processes. And these are just some of the internal things that we see a lot. And it's, again, it's my team's writing it down on that little spiral notebook, and I put it in my shirt pocket. And a lot of guys, they call that kind of their Bible. They wrote down the little tips and tricks that they learned over the year at the site, and they tuck it in there. The challenge is the person sitting right next to them doesn't have that information. So the old way is, this is my stuff. And the new way is everybody's looking at the same stuff, especially in the current labor market where people are retiring, they're leaving for other jobs, or you've had turnover. Everybody should be able to access the information, not just a handful of people. And the old way also is a guy coming off the roof, goes down to a desktop computer, and he's tapping on the keyboard, can't find anything, and it takes him a long time. That guy on the left there, I actually took that photo. All right. This guy had been with the organization for 36 years. Super nice guy. But all the information was on this computer here. And the challenge is he kept having to come back and forth from the field to access the stuff to do his job. But that's just the way they did it. The guy on the right there, though, he actually documented everything, and he's walking around with an iPad and pulls a phone out of his pocket and he can access it. That's more the modern way, more the way that people are starting to access stuff today. And this is coming from buildings are getting smarter. A lot of your new buildings are integrating smart building technologies. The older buildings, not so much. A lot of them are analog. They're old systems. So you've got that mix. And what we're going to talk about here is really how to bridge that gap between the old way and the new way. And it really starts with looking at the modern way. Your team is walking around with a phone in their pocket. All right. They're walking around with an iPad. They're walking around with a laptop, whatever they've got, but they're walking around with stuff in the field. And I cannot stress this enough, in the field. The team is in the field. So the easier you can make it, and the minimize, or the way that you can minimize the back and forth is going to speed up their processes of being able to respond when something is going on. All right. They can respond when something goes sideways in the field, not having to go back and forth. And there's a lot of tools that you can utilize right now. And I'll show you what some of that can look like here in a few minutes. But again, you want to minimize the time that they're coming back and forth from the field by giving them tools, modern tools today. And these are tools. Technologies are tools. All right. Don't kid yourself. They're not any different than a wrench. If it's a tool that I can get out there and access the stuff to do my job, then this is going to help me. It's a tool. But imagine having all of your equipment information at your fingertips. All of the information. Where is it? What is it? What does it control? What parts of the building does it serve? All of that information, before I even jump on my golf cart or jump in my car to run over to the building, I know what's where. And on top of that, the new person who starts on your team has access to it day one. Imagine that. Part of the problem is that the newest team members don't know what's in the field. Now they do. And I'll show you what that can look like here in a few minutes. But again, the institutional knowledge loss can be huge. Yeah, I mean, it could be literally 80, 100 years of institutional knowledge between losing three guys. Three guys, do the math. Three guys, been there 30 years, 90 years worth of institutional knowledge, walks out the door when they retire. But these are the folks who know where stuff is, those hidden things. They know what ceiling tile to pop. They know what that red dot on that ceiling grid is there. They were the ones that wrote in Sharpie on the grid, but they also know where all your fire alarm panels are. They know where the mains are. They know where all the backflows are. But they were also there when some things happened over time. And we'll look at that. But how are you getting new team members up to speed? Most of the trainings that I hear are taking 6 months, a year to get people fully up to speed. And a lot of that time really comes down to they just don't know where stuff is. So they're learning your building. There's an old saying I've heard for multiple times from guys that I've known in the industry for a long time, that they'll say, if you've been in one building, you've been in one building. Every building's different. Every building's gone through changes differently. So part of that challenge is getting those new people up to speed, is just knowing where stuff is, getting to know your site, getting to know your buildings, and also your processes. So you want to maximize and really make sure that your processes are as efficient as possible to get those new people up to speed. But here's the other challenge: is a lot of the folks rely on Bob. All right, Bob's the guy. Think about the person on your team that has been there the longest, that everybody calls when something goes sideways. That's Bob. Okay, we jokingly say it's Bob. It could be Carl, could be John, could be Betty. It doesn't matter. Think about who that person is, but that's the person that everybody leans on. He's been there for a long time and really just knows where that stuff is and knows what happened over time. Well, Bob knows where every unit is. He knows where AHU 11 is, but he also remembers when it was installed. He also remembers the problem that they had when they installed it, because he was there. But he also knows where every isolation valve is in your building, and he knows what parts of the building it serves. All right, Bob's that guy. But he also was there when all the changes happened in the building. He remembers, oh, this used to be 2 classrooms, but we blew it open. Now it's a lab, and we actually had to run we had to run natural gas in here too, because it's now a lab. And matter of fact, we added these hoods. He was there. He remembers all that backstory. All right. So again, that's his institutional knowledge that he knows. He was there. But what do you do when Bob walks into your office and says he's retiring next month? All right. This is happening around the country. Everybody's got a Bob. Everybody's got a Betty. Everybody's got a John, whoever that's been on the team that's in that retirement window. And what do you do when they walk in and they say, listen, I'm tired? It's happening around the country. But what that means is roughly 30% of facilities teams are in that 5-year retirement window. That's a big number. But look at that stat down at the bottom, that little quote there. He's going to lose over 100 years of experience. 100 years. That's just the 30% on that team. That's a lot of institutional knowledge that's going to walk out that door. So what are some of the ways that you're capturing that? How are you doing it? Have you been doing it for a while, or you're planning on doing that? Well, you don't always know when this person's going to retire. Most of the time you'll have a heads up. They'll say, hey, I'm thinking about retiring next year. And a lot of those guys say that for 4 or 5 years, 4 or 5 years, and they're going to retire next year. It's always next year, but it's coming and it's going to happen. So staff retirements and translates to lost institutional knowledge. A lot of that information walks out the door with them. So remember, they know where all the isolation valves are. They were there when all the changes happened in the building. When they leave, a lot of times that institutional knowledge walks out with them. And many times I hear they practically have to change their cell phone number, because after they do retire, they never stop getting those calls, because they're still that guy. But again, what's the goal? It's to capture that institutional knowledge so that everybody's on the same page. Well, here's some of the ramifications of losing that institutional knowledge. All right. If that person who knows where those isolation valves are isn't there, then what happens when something goes sideways? So you have a water pipe break, you have a sprinkler head pop. Does everybody on your team know where the isolation valves are, or even the mains? Those pictures that you see there in the bottom right, those two, those are from clients. Okay, these are prior to me working with them, even talking to them. This is what happens. All right, pipes burst. No one knows where the main is. No one knows where the isolation valve is. 45 minutes is that picture on the right. 45 minutes, the bottom right. That's what happened, right? This can go sideways quickly. Water doesn't wait. I always say that water doesn't wait. And also water finds a way. If it can find a way in, it's going to find a way in. But it doesn't take a long time for water to do this. And I look at water as like a gas pump. The longer it runs, the more money it costs. That dial is just spinning and it's running and running. The more it's flooding, right, the more money it's going to cost you to fix it. But there's also ancillary challenges with that too. What other damage? It's not usually just flooring and drywall and ceiling tiles, right? It's other stuff. So again, it could add up really quickly. So the faster you can shut that off, you could help minimize that damage. But some of the steps that you can take to capture that institutional knowledge is proactively start documenting what they know. Think about the things that one or two people know at your site and document that. I give you an example. One of the schools that I work with, he had his lead plumber had been there for over 40 years, but he was retiring, had some health issues, and he was retiring. And he intentionally walked around with the guy and was documenting everything that the guy was talking about between the buildings. He was there when they were doing site work. He was there when they built some of the buildings, but he was walking around with him and recording the guy's actual voice. When, 1985, we had this, and it actually, you would think that the line runs here and it actually runs over here and it actually supplies this building and also this outbuilding that's over here. He would never know that if he didn't start documenting that information. The other challenge is always scanning and digitizing that building information. A lot of the information that's out there is a mix of paper and digital. You got a plan room, or you've got some stuff on a share drive someplace, or maybe it's an external hard drive, or some of it might be in a cloud or whatever. But the point is it's all over the place. Also, when you're thinking about technology tools, think about technologies that are user friendly. You're going to have a mix of people on your team. You're going to have guys that have been there for a long time that aren't as tech savvy, and you're going to have other people that were born with a smartphone in their hand. It's got to be easy. If it's not easy, your team's not going to use it. So it's got to make sure it's a user friendly. It's very intuitive. It's not rocket science. You don't need a degree to be able to use it. Also, and I cannot stress this enough, mobile. Every person on your team has a phone in their pocket. 95% of them have a smartphone. So ask yourself, can I access all the information that I need, or can they access all the information from their phone or from a tablet? That's really important today because that's, again, that new modern approach. Also, maintain that single source of truth. Have that hub where you can access, and some of it's through dynamic links out to other things, but make sure you can go to one spot and access that stuff. Also, hire tech savvy employees. Think about the new hires that you're going to be bringing on board. Are they tech savvy? You want to look for those folks who are really embracing, they want to be able to access it on their phone. They want to be able to access stuff in the field, on the roof, in the mechanical room, wherever the heck they are from building to building. But most important, and I'm going to dive into this a little bit deeper in a minute, is go from months of training to weeks. Let me repeat that. Go from months of training to weeks. Part of that ramp up time, as I mentioned earlier, the biggest part of that is just getting to know your sites. So imagine a new person. Let's role play that for a second. Comes on board tomorrow, today, right? The next day, they have access to where all your mechanical equipment is, every unit. They have access, even your jockey pumps and your everything is in that mechanical room, not just the big stuff, all your stuff, all your shutoffs, all your electrical drawings, all your historical information, all in one spot. That's what you can do. But that's what speeds up that ramp up time for those new hires, is now they know where that stuff is. Now they can focus on those core competencies and do their job. All right. And again, it's accessing information to do their jobs. So the labor shortage stats that are out there, this is that compounded challenge that everybody's up against right now is, and look at that stat in the upper left-hand corner there. For every person who's retiring, it's a 5-to-2 ratio for who's coming in. That's not sustainable. So what a lot of orgs are doing is they're really running at a down 20%, 30% headcount. They're losing people, not just to retirement, they're losing people who are getting a job up the street, making $8 more an hour. That's the market we're in right now. Skilled trades are a premium. And I'm a staunch proponent of skilled trades. I literally scream it from the rooftops that, we need kids to really look at skilled trades as a profession, because it's not just a job, it is a career. And I think that's been an area that's gone out of focus for a number of years. But again, these are opportunities for people, and you can even bring people in and train people. I actually talked to a guy yesterday, and he said, I would rather have somebody who's trainable than I would have somebody who's got a degree necessarily. He said, because if I can teach them the way we do things, and he even started his own in-house apprentice program because of that. That's what people are having to do right now, but they're getting people in and they're sustaining those people. So what are some of the resources for tackling that labor shortage? And look at some of the trade organizations that are out there. They have job posting boards. Are you utilizing those to post your jobs? Look at trade publications that are available. There are a lot of websites out there that allow you to post your openings. Look at other online resources as well. I heard this from a guy the other day. He had a high school internship program. He went to all the local high schools around their site within a certain geographic area. He went to all those high schools and offered a basically like a part-time program for these kids to come in, and he paid them. He paid them to come in and just learn, and they could jump with the electrician one week and then go to the HVAC tech the next week and then go with a plumber another week. They gave them these opportunities to see what it was like, and they paid them. It was minimal, but they paid them. And he's actually been able to hire some of those kids on to his team. I thought that was phenomenal. A lot of orgs are also looking at in-house apprenticeship programs. So are you able to pull people in and have them work side by side with your team, train them up? And some of these organizations are saying, listen, we'll do an apprenticeship program. You have to stay on board for a couple of years. They do it, but then they're also retaining those people afterwards. They're showing them the way that they can make a successful living. Also, are you partnering with your local trade schools and community colleges? They're putting kids out in a lot of community colleges around the country that are coming out into the market with HVAC, with electrical backgrounds, with plumbing. All right. Can you hire some of those directly from those? And do you have a pipeline for those trade schools and community colleges? What's your union relationships? Have you partnered with the union to be able to leverage those people who are retiring? Maybe work with your local union. I've heard a couple of places that are working with their local unions to actually reclassify the person who's going to retire into a completely different job category. They cut their hours back to about 22 to 26. All right. Actually got a raise per hour. But what the benefit was, because they reclassified that person who's retiring, they were able to open up that job sooner, and they were actually able to use that person who has moved into that other job classification to train that new hire when they get them on board. That's outside the box, and that was a way that they worked with their union. Also, are there cooperative partnerships that you can work with other schools? Maybe share some of those resources. Maybe you have an internship program or an apprentice program that you can share those resources between multiple schools. Also, are you doing job fairs to put it out there that you have these opportunities? I was talking to one school down in the Southeast US, and they were saying they had a job fair, and they actually picked up 3 people that were friends of other at the job fair, because the facilities team had their own table, but so did accounting, so did HR, so did all these other departments. And when a few people were walking around, he said, you know what, my son's going to trade school right now. I didn't even know you guys had any openings. They had no idea, and they're within the same organization. Job fairs allow you to have that open communication like that too. Also, look at the military. Look at your local recruiting offices and contact them and see if there are ways that you can help work with them for the military who's transitioning out of the military. Those are great employees and great resources for you to look at. So, what's the way forward? Let's really take a look at that. And what I always say is this: keeping up with those building changes can be a big challenge. And what that means oftentimes is every change to your building means something that looks like this. It's either a roll of drawings or maybe it's a thumb drive or a CD, but your stuff is moving. So these drawings reflect the changes to your building. So all your mechanicals that move, all your shutoffs that move, your walls and everything else that moves, that represents a new set of drawings. So how do you keep up with that? Well, a lot of folks end up with something like this, especially with old buildings. You'll have some old drawings. Maybe you have scanned some stuff in, and we'll talk about that in a second. But each one of these drawings represents a change to your building. So every change means a new set of something, whether it's a roll, whether it's stick files, a thumb drive, or whatever. But how do you keep up with that? And what's the most recent drawings for the room 101 and 102 in building A? I go into one of these cubbies, or I start opening up drawers and just rolling drawings out, or I open up a full file folder that looks like this, and it's just got a whole bunch of drawings. I can't even say what date they were or what building it's for. So this right here isn't really much different than this. When I go to find stuff, I either usually have to look through this or something that looks like this. Well, it's time. I have to open up. Remember that big T word I keep bringing up is time. Your team's looking through this stuff. They're trying to find stuff. A lot of times when I'm talking to facilities folks, I see rolls sitting behind their desk, and I'm like, "What is? Oh, that's my electrical drawings." Well, really? Well, why are those yours? These, well, that's where I've done all my markups and stuff, and that's my kind of my shop drawings, and that's the ones that I use. Okay, well, yeah, but the new guy doesn't even know where those are. Well, right. That's the problem I'm talking about right here is the new guy's looking at this or this. The challenge is, even if I scan this stuff in, it doesn't mean I can find it. Scans are a picture. It's a scan of it's a picture of your drawing, and trying to find that stuff can be a mess. And the goal is you want your team to be able to find the stuff to do their job. Well, start documenting where your equipment's located. That's the second part here. It's not just the drawings, it's where is the stuff and current conditions of what it is. All right. A lot of these photos that you see here are actual people that I've talked to and I've worked with that are documenting that stuff. And if you notice here, the guy on the left, he'd been there, he's a lead electrician. He'd been there for 37 years. The guy in the middle there, he has been there for 42 years. They're documenting where the stuff is. And the guy on the far left there, he said part of the reason he wants to document this stuff is because he doesn't want his phone ringing off the hook when he leaves. You get it. But he's the one that knows where everything is, and he was there when everything changed. But the modern way is this. It's accessing information wherever the heck I'm at. So let's kind of role play this. And this is what this could look like or should look like. As-built. I want to see all the drawings for a building. I pull my phone out of my pocket, or in this case, a tablet. I tap on an app. I want to see the information for a building. I tap on the building, and I want to see all the as-built. Having them all mapped out, showing what drawing sets touch what part of the building is key. Where that's really a big deal is, think about it. You guys have projects all the time. You're running around like crazy. So how many changes happened in the southeast corner of the third floor? I don't know. So what I do is I start opening up those PDFs, or I start opening up, in most cases, I start opening up drawings and rolling them out on a table. Nope, that one didn't touch that floor. Oh, nope, that one didn't. Oh, here's one. Oh, wait a minute. This one's from 1978. Again, it's just time. I'm flipping through stuff. And a lot of times I hear folks go into a plan room or they go to a share drive and they just give up after 2 hours. They just go out in the field and try and figure it out. That's normal, but there's better ways. And that's what I'm talking about here. To access all the building equipment, same thing. You tap on an app and have access to where the equipment is. But say I walk up to a unit, now I can actually scan a QR code on a unit and see all the information for that unit. Make, model, serial number. I can access the manual. I can access an exploded parts list. I can have it linked back to my work order system. I can have it linked out to Grainger where I order parts. I can have it linked to anything, but I can also have photos. I can take a video. Remember that story I mentioned earlier? Have a video of the guy who's worked on that unit 50 times in his voice telling me the little nuance about that unit recorded. Everybody can now see that. That's what you can do today, capturing that institutional knowledge. Also, shutoffs. Think about it. Gas, water, power, med gas. Access it all the same way, but mapped out on actual floor plans with a button that says shutoffs. Okay. Think about not just the stuff in the building, the stuff between the buildings, backflows, sewer cleanouts, all of that information, even descriptions and photos, description, what part of the building does this shut off? What does it serve? Having zone maps showing what parts of the building that shuts off. You can do that. Think about it from the standpoint of electrical panels, having the electrical panel name, having the panel schedule, photos of it, but now it's also searchable. So let me role play that with you. If I go into a room and on the outlet, it says panel number LM123, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's got the panel name on it and it says circuit X, okay? You could type that in, search, and find that panel, just that panel. What room's it in, what floor is it on, what building's it in. You can do that today. And now you can respond faster. So let's open it up to some questions. Suzanne.
Yes, sir. We have a number that have been coming in.
Great.
So let's start with this one. So David, there's a question here about the difference between an FCA and an equipment inventory. Can you clarify some of those differences?
Yeah, so an FCA, oftentimes I hear FCAs when they're out in the field, they're capturing what's on your plan. So they're looking at mechanical drawings and they're going to capture information. A lot of times they're just verifying that it's really out there. But again, it's only as good as the information that you're providing. So in an FCA, traditionally, I'll hear they're doing an export of their existing database, which again can be missing a lot of stuff, but they're only validating what's out there on your list. They're not necessarily adding the stuff that's missing. So let me give you this example. I've got lists from clients in the past where they'll walk in and we don't do FCAs, we do equipment validation, but when the client goes out and gives me a list, I'll see, well, there's 4 units that are supposed to be in this mechanical room, 4. But I'll open up the door to the mechanical room and I'll see the 4. I can see there's a boiler over there. There's a pump over here. There's maybe an HVAC unit in the corner or a fan, exhaust fan, whatever. But then I'm looking around and wait a minute, there's 4 pumps in this room. There's, a bunch of jockey pumps over here. There's an expansion tank up here. There's whatever energy recovery units or some places, I mean, it really, they're missing a lot of stuff. So that database and that field verified database is the key. And the difference between the field verified asset database and what the FCA is doing, they are connected, but with the way that they oftentimes are missing and there's holes is the data is not up to date over here. So this is not going to be up to date. I hope that makes sense.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that.
Certainly.
We had an FCA done last year and it's missing a lot. How have you seen other schools handle that problem?
Sure. Yeah, again, an FCA needs to be a living, breathing thing. Everybody thinks that it's a one and done. I don't look at it that way. I look at it as an FCA, your results, especially from your asset side, the buildings change all the time. So if you're doing an FCA today or this year, and then you're not going to do another one for another 3 years, a lot of stuff changes in 3 years. You know, stuff breaks, you know, you move, you reallocate space, a bunch of things change. So it's not, I look at an FCA shouldn't be a snapshot. Right now, it's a snapshot in time in most orgs, but it
Mhm.
needs to be that living, breathing thing that changes as as your building changes, if that makes sense. Because now you're looking at current conditions, not just that snapshot in time from 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
As far as collecting data for the FCA, is it better to have a third party or to have your facilities team handle that?
Yeah, I would answer it this way is again, it's that big number T or big letter T that I mentioned earlier. It's time. Many organizations, they just don't have time. I actually was talking to a community college district down in Texas earlier this week, and he said, you know, based on the current rate right now, if we tried to do this, I think it would take us 200 years to do it in-house. He's short-staffed, you know, and that's not unusual at many organizations. I can only speak for our team when we're out doing the field verification. We do millions and millions of square feet in 90 days, done. And we're not just capturing the stuff that's in your database, we're adding all the stuff that's missing. And I'll give you an example. Our team's on site at a school right now, actually, in the Midwest. And they got a list from the client that said total for these 5 buildings was roughly 200 units, 200 equipment pieces in their database. They had 200 in the first building. Okay, so again, it's a lot of missing stuff, and it's not their fault. They just that they don't know, or some of that stuff wasn't included in the original site capture. I think that's the stuff that is the meat of an FCA with regards to the assets is accurate information, the real stuff that's in the field, because then you're able to account for all those little things, because those little things add up too. It's not just the big units.
Okay. Can you track if an asset has moved from another location without your knowledge?
Well, keep in mind, it's a process, internal process thing. So establishing, we work with clients around the country to establish those processes. So teaching and educating the team when they repurpose a unit, so they move a unit from building A to building 6 or whatever the building nomenclature is for that particular client. We teach them how they can move this unit over here, and everything moves with it. So it's not all the historical stuff for that unit. If you're moving a rooftop unit from here over here and reallocating it to another building, you can carry all that historical stuff with it. You're not having to reinvent a wheel. So yeah, you can, in our system anyway, you can move that equipment, and it's all mapped out on a floor plan based on floors and levels. So basement, all the floor levels, mezzanine levels, and roof.
Okay.
Mhm.
I'm down 30% headcount and I'm having to store some HVAC PM tasks. Can vendors also get access to these systems? And what kind of security is there to limit their capabilities?
Yeah, I think honestly, that's a really great question. And the way I always look at it this way is yes, you always want your vendors to be able to have access to it, but you should be able to control it, whatever technologies you go with. Okay. Ours, you can control it at the building level. So for instance, if I've got a third-party vendor that comes out and services my VAVs, all right, giving them access to the buildings that are specific for your contract with them, or maybe they're design construction, you're doing a new renovation on a building, or you're gutting the whole building. You want them to be able to have access to all the drawings for that building, all the historical stuff, all the mechanicals, all the shutoffs. Yeah, being able to turn them on to those and then turn them off. But give them access to the stuff they need to do their job is going to keep your phone from ringing off the hook too.
That's a good one too. Yeah. We
Yeah.
don't want that.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. We're doing asset collection as we speak, and we're having a hard time getting the assessors to collect serial and model numbers. How should we handle this?
That's a process. That's a process change. I'm not sure what system you're using. Ours, you open up the equipment record. I'll give you an example. I don't know if you can see my screen here, but attach a QR code to it so they can walk up to the unit with their phone, have the app on their phone, scan that QR code, and it automatically opens up that equipment record for that unit. They can even scan the text in the unit with the app, scan that text, and it will automatically populate it with that text for that serial number or that model number. And then as soon as they hit save, everybody sees it. It's not a matter of them. Some of the units, and I think it's Train and a few of the other units, the model number or the serial numbers, 30 characters or something. Having to type all that in. Oh, shoot, I forgot that extra zero or that A or whatever. Our system actually, you can even voice that into it. It will text. It'll type in your voice to text as well and hit save, and then everybody sees it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go. Here we go. How do you overcome the challenges of poor Wi-Fi connectivity in some of the mechanical and the electrical rooms if we're trying to get our craftspeople to do the mobile solution?
Actually, again, I can only, and I apologize, I can only share our software. But to answer that question is really simple. Our system works offline. You have the ability to sync it offline. So you can work offline, get back to where you do have cell reception. Everything that you changed and added automatically gets pushed up to the cloud and out to all the other people's mobile devices. So you can work completely offline. And I feel for you because I've been there in the mechanical rooms where you're in that concrete mechanical room, or sometimes you're on a roof and there's no Wi-Fi, or you're in a basement where Wi-Fi is spotty at best. You want to be able to work offline. In our system, you can do that. You can type in you can add equipment records, take photos, videos, all of that, and then it automatically updates as soon as you get back in Wi-Fi range.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're looking at a new CMMS system right now, but
Mhm.
I haven't found one that does all of what I need. Should I just find a cheap ticketing system and then find others to plug the holes?
Yeah, I think everybody wants that, for lack of a better term, the magic bullet, the one thing that'll do everything. Unfortunately, it doesn't exist right now. They do a lot of things really well. CMMS systems do a great job of scheduling PMs, doing work orders for things that break and all of that. Some of them touch on assets a little bit. Our system actually maps the stuff out. We're not a work order system. Our system actually maps out where the equipment is, ties it back to all the equipment records, ties it back to your work order system through a URL. But also you have the ability to attach all those additional things like your model number, your serial number, all the stuff associated with the unit, but also the ancillary things, the binder you got on that shelf. Okay, that O&M manual, that exploded parts list, the warranty information, all of it's now tied to the actual unit. So you don't have to dig. You can even put links to YouTube videos in there. If you found a great video on how to service something, you can link that and embed that URL for that YouTube video in there, and everybody sees that. Okay. I mentioned you can even have it link out to a parts list or anything like that. You can do all of that, but it's tied to the actual unit.
Okay. How much time is required by my team to implement a system like this?
If you're doing it yourself, it's going to take a long time. But our team, we have what's called a quick start. We actually come on site. We do all the work. You basically, I've had clients, it's usually one of two things. Either they've got the most tenured guy will walk with us that knows which ceiling tile to pop, and he's been there for a long time. Usually one guy, maybe two. At the most, we're there inside of 90 days and we're done. We walk out and it's in your hands and your team's trained. Or the flip side of that is they give us key fobs and a master set of keys, and I pull all the electrical panel keys, which I have a giant ring of every electrical panel you can imagine key in my backpack right here. And we walk it and we open every door. We're on every level, every room, every closet, and we're mapping. We know what we're looking for. So there's those two different ways that we've done it. But at the end of the day, if we're doing it, the lift is on us. It's minimal on your team.
Okay. I'm finding it difficult to retain skilled individuals with today's competitive wage rates, which you did touch on a bit, and we're losing valuable field knowledge built up over decades. How do you think we should tackle the issue, especially given the significant loss of information already encountered? Now, you did share with us some very specific best practices. Is there anything else that folks should keep in mind, obviously as the retirement wave continues and there's a decline in kids in the skilled trades?
Certainly.
although they have the knowledge but are not going into the positions on campus.
Yeah, certainly. I've heard some really creative ways, which I'm happy to share. One is, through bonus programs. I thought this was a great idea. They actually set it up to build this team approach too, where they have a team bonus annually. They went to their C-suite and they had that discussion, and they created this team bonus on an annual basis. But then they also have quarterly individual bonuses based off certain benchmarks too. Some of it is based off of response. Some of it's even based off of attendance. Okay. Minimal requirements to reach these real goals. Okay. Others, it's getting creative with little things that go a long way. Having a monthly lunch for the team, having, I'm going to, guy came in on the weekend and put out some fires for us. He paid for his wife and his family to go out to dinner with him one night. I mean, just little things like that. It's a lot of it's culture too. It's a welcoming culture. I don't use the word family when I comes to business. I come at it from listen, we're all part of a team and we're here to help each other out. So it's not always just about money. A lot of times it is, but it's not always about money. A lot of times it's about going that extra mile to show them you've got their back too.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Certainly.
So, David, this has been fantastic. Folks can see the information, your contact information there on the screen.
Please.
Thank you very much for being with us today.
My
Obviously,
pleasure.
thank you very much for the partnership that we have with the ARC team, being able to deliver this type of educational content to the membership. As a reminder to all of our guests who have been with us today, this session is being recorded. It will be available. You will be notified when that is available to you. And then as a reminder, those who are with us that are in need of AIA or educational credits, the contact member on our team is Billy Zidek. Her email address again is billie@appa.org. So thank you all for being with us again. David, again, kudos and thanks to you.
My
And we
pleasure.
everyone a very enjoyable rest of the day. Take care.
Be well.